I am honored to have had Peter as my research mentor for a good amount of time now, and especially related to my career at RIT and NTID. I'm excited to share my experience as a deaf person and my journey in academia. You can see several pictures I have here on the first slide from being a baby, and then you see some of my family, you see a picture of me in school, and then high school graduation, and then you see me, this more formal picture is at RIT. So I'll be discussing my journey as a Black deaf person. So you can see high school through college graduation. You might think it was a real straight journey, but indeed it was not. This second bottom right picture is what my journey has been like. It's been very frustrating and lots of twists and turns along the way. For this presentation, I will be showing things that really have helped me a lot in my journey in my career, and I will also show you some things that have been very frustrating and almost caused me to quit both school and my career. There were probably about 5 times where I almost quit and dropped out, but I did not. So now I'll be talking first about my experience, which most importantly, I would say, includes the word intersectionality. There are several different signs that you might see for intersectionality. This is what I use for this term. If you think about a variety of different identities, you can see in the background here, this is all these lines are different identities possible. These could be things that you are able to do, that you're interested in. The systems at large can affect someone's life and their identities and how they might identify in one way or another. And one person who identifies in one specific way might have a completely different experience from someone who identifies in a similar way. Or they might have the same experiences. Maybe it's a Black deaf woman who has similar experiences to me, but different in the fact that they're a woman and I'm a man. So it's important to remember intersectionality in that framework in talking about navigating the system. Now, when we talk about a Black deaf person living in America, Black deaf people in general living in America, you see this book here, Black and Deaf in America. One question is, are we that different? Is the subtitle. On page 1, there's talk about 1972 and a meeting of individuals. It was the 4th annual biennial conference of professional rehabilitation workers with the adult deaf. Again, this was in 1972. It seemed that the employment rate for Black deaf people was higher than that of white deaf people. And very few Black deaf people actually went beyond 8th grade in school. Black deaf people and their parents were often not aware of services available to them. Black deaf children had a severe lack of Black deaf role models who were adults that they could learn from. Unfortunately, this unemployment rates are still an issue. It has improved somewhat, but it seems that the quality may be similar to how it has been historically. Now, again, Black deaf people and their parents being aware of resources, I would say that they are definitely more aware these days than they were previously, but they are still very limited in what resources they know about or can receive. There are a lot of systemic barriers to Black individuals in general and Black deaf people more specifically. And of course, if you're Black and deaf, you might experience even more oppression or barriers than being Black and hearing. Talking about my family. Here's a picture of my family. It's a beautiful family. You can see my parents in the middle, and then my brothers and sister on the outsides. I'm the little boy in the front. Really, if you see me in real life, I'm not very short. I'm 6'6". I beat all of my family in height now. But my brothers and sister were deaf, same as me. My mom herself is hard of hearing. My father is the only one in our family that was hearing. Poor guy. But you think about, oh my, a Black deaf family, you know, several members who are deaf, you might come together, you might have great conversations, you might chat a lot. But of course, at this time in 1972, my mom and my dad and my sister was 7 at that time. So when my sister was born, she was the first deaf child that my parents had, and they weren't sure exactly what to do with her. So they put her in one program, and then my brothers after her went into a similar program. And then when I was born, at the time I was born, my sister was 15 years old. So she was in high school by that time. And my 2 brothers were in middle school. And then here I was born. So my parents had already basically navigated the deaf education system for my brothers and sister. And there wasn't a great educational system for deaf children, especially Black deaf children at that time. For some reason, one of my sister's teachers punished her one time by locking her in a closet as punishment. That's just one example of one experience that they had. Another time, my brother was going to get on a slide, and another boy pushed him off the slide, and my brother fell down and was crying and was hurt. And the teacher looked over and saw this happening and just walked away and didn't help at all. That's another example. Several years later, when I went into school, it was a bit different because of educational laws and different supervision policies. My parents had already experienced navigating the deaf educational system, but it had changed some by the time I started school. So I grew up in Ohio, Cincinnati specifically. It's a beautiful city. You can see this picture here, beautiful river. That's where I grew up. Here's a picture of me in kindergarten with, of course, the amplifier box and the headphones. Really, people can't miss that we were hard of hearing or deaf at that time if we had that box and the headphones connected to us. But I looked the same as my peers, so I didn't see it as a difference or any big deal. So this was an oral program, which meant that we could not sign. My brothers and sister also had the same educational experience. Now remember, I'm the youngest, so my siblings were teenagers by the time I went into elementary, and then they had gone on and graduated. This was my brother's high school graduation. And even though I was 11 years apart from my next youngest brother, I felt like we were close. I enjoyed being around them, but we did have that age difference. I think my sister was in college 1983 to 88. She would come over with her deaf friends, and they would all be signing and having their conversations. But now I wasn't able to sign in school. My family did not sign at home. My brothers and sister did a little bit with their friends, but I had not started learning sign at that time. So I remember watching my sister and her friends at 13 years old, thinking that I just couldn't wait to be like them and be signing and having that kind of fun. My sister had gone off to college, and then she got married and she had her life. And then I had my brothers, and my parents had a large family. You can see this picture here is my mother's family. Both my parents had large families, but this is only my mother's. If we had my father's side in here too, it would be even an even larger picture, even more people. But anyway, I felt like I had no real connection with my cousins or my aunts and uncles. They were all hearing. I couldn't really communicate with them very well. My mother at that time decided to keep us from her family, really, because she had experienced some trauma previously from her siblings, her brothers, and she was the one girl. She had one sister. But her brothers picked on her a lot and then picked on our family as she had us children. So she decided to keep us separate from her family. And then also in school, I felt very alone, very lonely. I didn't really have friends inside or outside of school. So I filled my time with food and with eating. And that was my comfort. That was how I found comfort. And my other friends were books. I don't know if you remember Scholastic, the book club, Scholastic Book Club. You can order the books. One example is the Berenstain Bears and Heathcliff. I remember bringing these little brochures home and telling my mom that I wanted to order these books and then reading a bunch of them. I definitely liked books with pictures and reading those. In school, I remember I liked a variety of topics, math and art and gym. I even tried music because it was required. So I even tried that a little bit. But one odd thing that came up in my time in school was the book Heidi. I think I was about fourth grade. And I remember this book didn't have pictures. The teacher required that I write a book report on Heidi, and I said that I wasn't going to do it. I was willing to read the book, but I wasn't going to write a report on it. The teacher said that I had to do it. She talked with my mom. She said, I don't understand why Joseph is refusing to write this book report. I've tried to get him to do it, and he's not doing it. He refuses to do it. And I said, why should I write a book report on some little white girl? At that point, my mom actually wrote the book report for me and turned it in. And after that point beyond, I had my mom write my papers for me. I didn't have an interest in writing. And, I thought writing really meant filling in a blanks or replacing some words. I didn't really know how to actually write. I went into middle school, and there were some deaf and hard of hearing peers, but there were also some deaf signing students from another school. So when we all came together in this mainstream environment, my first best friend whom I met was Dean, and he used ASL. And really, we weren't friendly with each other at that time. We kind of did a stare down, had a little fight, and then we became friends from then on. It was great. But I remember he used ASL. We had a shared class together. We did have an interpreter, which I didn't know how to use. And there were occasionally interpreters in my classroom. Some classes didn't have an interpreter, and I seemed to struggle more in those classes. And so it seemed like I was able to understand a bit more with the interpreter. And I started to pick up sign about that time. I was about 10 or 11 maybe, and then close to 13 when I started picking up a little bit more sign. Next oldest brother went to college at the University of Dayton. And I remember seeing him walk across the stage and graduate. And I remember not seeing my sister graduate from college, and then my second oldest brother didn't graduate, didn't go to college either. So I, seeing my brother graduate from the University of Dayton, decided that I wanted to go to college also. I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So then I then also saw him graduate again from ITT and then excel in his career and so on and so forth. So I actually gained more motivation when I was in middle school from seeing the success of my brother. So now remember I said I refused to write papers or that book report. I refused to write myself. At this time, I went back to school after seeing my brother graduate and start excelling in his career. I went back to school and my mom said that she would write my papers for me. And I said, no, I will do it. I'll do it myself. And I decided at that time that I could do what I wanted to do. Up to this point, through middle school, I didn't feel like I had to prove to people really that I was deaf and that I could do it. But that became my identity at that point in middle school, where I was the one who could succeed and who could achieve. And I went for a variety of awards up until high school.
So I went to Hughes High School, and this is the same school that my brothers had gone to. I was following in their footsteps. And at Hughes High School, I remember this being one of the most important times for me, where I always looked up to high school students. I always wanted to prepare for high school students. I saw my siblings go through high school. And then when it was my turn to go into high school, there were popular people, there were athletic people, there were sports people, and then there was also some street life people that I preferred to avoid. But I felt like I had to pick one of these identities between the different groups of high school students, and I picked nerd. Nerd was it for me. For me, I felt that being a nerd as my identity was safe because I didn't feel that popular. I wasn't that athletic, but I felt that being a nerd was right for me. That fit my identity. And at that time, I was about 12 and I was already 6'3", almost 6'4". So no one messed with me because I was so tall and I was pretty bulky. So for me, high school was very important. I remember thinking that I was very aware at that time of the different identities, and so I knew that I could get off track easily from my academics. I didn't want to be in the popular group where I was so focused on looks. Again, I wanted to be like my brother. I wanted to graduate high school and then go on to college. And so I started my presentation talking about the system, and I knew that as a Black deaf person, it wouldn't be easy for me to find a job and it wouldn't be easy for me to make a good income. I knew that it would be a struggle. And so this chart shows the different levels of earnings on average that people in different classes earn. So I decided that I wanted to be involved in business. I was interested in money. I wanted a good income. And my high school had several different programs, several different specific programs with specific focuses. So if people were interested in becoming teachers, they could do that. I was kind of interested in teaching, but there isn't good money in it. So I wasn't really interested in that. And then I thought about being a health professional like a doctor, but I wasn't that interested. But then there was a computing program, and I thought computers mean money. So I decided to pick computers as my program. And again, I was a nerd. That was an identity for me. So as a nerd, I was involved in the Honor Society, in leadership. I volunteered in many different things. I was involved in the business programs and accounting as well. At that time, I wanted to become an accountant. And I guess in a way, I do account for numbers and data in my analysis, I suppose. But this was really my identity. And so other students knew me as, being the one who liked school. And I did. I enjoyed school. So I won several different awards. I did very well here. The one that I am most proud of, though, is this for Black History Month. So during this time, I was a junior in high school, and there was an announcement about a Black History Month contest. They were inviting students to participate by submissions. So they had 100 questions that you had to answer. They were all multiple choice questions. And at that time, remember, there was no Google, there was no internet. So I had to physically go to the library and look in books to find the answers to these. And for this, I took this as a challenge. We had 2 weeks to do it, and I was ready for the challenge. So I didn't even worry about my homework. I wanted to just do this Black History Month quiz. So fortunately, there was a library fairly close to home, and I went to that library, but they didn't have very many materials for me. So I got on a bus and rode 45 minutes to the downtown library, where I could look at all the different books and magazines, archives. I even used the microfiche film, the printers, to be able to find all of the information that I needed. So I took a lot of time in the library to fill out this quiz, and then I turned it in. I felt like I had worked very hard, and I knew that I had done a good job. When it came time for the results to be announced, they called everyone into the auditorium to make the announcement, and they announced that there were 3 winners. They gave the name of the 3rd winner, and then the name of the 2nd winner. And then for the name of the 1st winner, they said we had 1 person who got 99 of the questions right and only 1 wrong. And then they said my name. And I was so shocked and so proud of it. I still have it right here. 1 question wrong, 1 question wrong, that's it. So I got up in front of everyone and I walked up to the stage and I won a boombox, which, you know, a lot of people were like, you're deaf, you don't need that, but it was mine, I won it. So that was a very proud moment for me. So in high school, I worked very hard. Like I said, I focused on my academics. And my goal was to be the top of my class, was to be the very top of my class, the valedictorian. Unfortunately, I was 8th, but it was okay. So I was 8th in my class. And of course, in high school, I had to take the SAT and ACT standardized tests. So I didn't do much prep for it. I thought that I did so well in high school. I had worked so hard that high school had taught me what I needed to know and that I was ready for the test without doing a lot of prep work. So I took the tests and got a 990 on my SAT. And I thought maybe the ACT would be fine and make up for it. And then I got a 17 on my ACT. So from that, I was confused. It was unexpected. I felt a little bit depressed seeing those scores, and I felt like my chance of getting into college was ruined because of it. So I had worked so hard in high school and gotten to nearly the top of my class. But then here again, reading was very strong for me, but writing was not very strong for me, because in the deaf program, their curriculum was completely different from the mainstream program. So I didn't get the right information and the right preparedness that I needed for these standardized tests. So this was a really difficult moment for me to not get high scores on these. And I want to remind everyone of the statistics here that the number of Black deaf people in college is even much smaller than the number of Black hearing people in college. So for here, again, I thought that my chances of college were ruined. So I only applied to 1 college. That was it. I didn't apply to any others. So the 1 college I applied to was Miami University, and I was accepted to it, which was really surprising to me. Despite my low SAT and ACT, despite I didn't even meet their minimum score requirements, but I guess because of my essay, because of my motivation, and because of my background, I guess they thought because I was a Black deaf person with a disability, maybe they just accepted me for that reason. I don't know exactly why, but I truly appreciate the chance that they gave me by accepting me to college at Miami University. So I started there in 1997. And when I started college, I remember, again, my goal was to get a good career and make a good income for myself. So I sat down with a VR counselor who said that I would need to get a C or above in my classes. And if I got below a C, then they would take away my funding for VR support. And I thought, okay. So I did it. And in my first semester, I got a 3.9, and my VR counselor was quiet after that. So again, from high school, I continued my identity as a nerd, basically very focused on school, and that was it. Completely focused on my academics and my grades. I really didn't do anything at all outside of my academics. And then two big things happened in my life. The first was that my physics class, which I enjoyed, for some reason I struggled a lot. Every time I got D's and F's in my physics class. And luckily the curve pulled me up, but I really struggled in my physics class, which made me feel like there was something wrong with me, like I might not be able to succeed. And then my brother, who here in the picture, I'm on the left. I weighed 360 pounds at this time. In the middle is my cousin. And then on the right is my closest brother, Greg, wearing the white shirt. Greg had cancer, was diagnosed with cancer in that year. And that was very difficult for me to deal with. And again, we hadn't been that close in a while. He was off having his own life, but then he died 6 months later. And that was a very difficult time for me. And that made me look at life differently. And to realize that my sole focus on academics and school made me miss out on a lot of other things that were important. It really made me take a close look at myself. And until that time, I had only thought about proving people wrong, people who think that deaf people can't do something. I just wanted to do it to prove them wrong. But at this time, I took some time to look at myself and think about what I really wanted and who am I? So I asked myself these questions and I thought about myself as a deaf person. I started thinking about my different identities. And I really started thinking about what I wanted. In the past, I was focused on trying to get people to accept me, but then I shifted my focus to think about what would make me happy and what would be the best result for me personally. So from there, I really changed my outlook on life. I was still focused on academics. I was still in the National Honor Society. And I continued to do well in college and to be involved in college activities. I did several different internships at Lilly, Marathon, Ashland Oil. I did at least 4 different internships. So I got a really well-rounded academic experience here. And then when I graduated, I was ready to go into work. I had 4 years of college. And I remember the quote that you have to make the best of those 4 years in college to develop yourself and find yourself. And I felt that I had my education, but I didn't really have the social life and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So at that time, the college picked me as their undergraduate graduation speaker. And one of the quotes that I used was, "Go where the wind blows." So after graduating, I thought, the typical course is that you graduate, you find a job, and then you have 2.5 kids, whatever that average number is. But I took some time to think about what I really wanted, and I realized that what I wanted was to go to Gallaudet University, was to deviate from that path. When I started at Gallaudet, now I had wanted a master's degree, and the theme here continues that I wanted to avoid writing as much as possible. So that's also why I tried to pick, I was a computing major. All I had to do was code, I didn't have to write a lot of essays. But they did force me to take a couple writing classes, which I initially didn't want to do, but then I ended up enjoying them. And after I graduated undergrad, I thought, I'm not really interested in a master's, but I guess if I'm going to get a master's, then I'll go to Gallaudet, because I didn't want to get another bachelor's. Gallaudet also had a linguistics program, which I thought might be interesting. So I applied for it. It was a 2-year program, so I thought that there wouldn't be too much writing. And when I applied, the department sent me a letter saying that that I was accepted for the master's program, but that they were also establishing a PhD program and that they would pay me to go into the PhD program. So I thought, sure, yeah, why not? I don't know exactly what my motivation was, but I thought it would be a free PhD. They were offering me free tuition. Why not? Let's go for it. So Gallaudet was a very rich experience for me. It was a really wonderful time in my life. From high school being a nerd, and then college starting to change my outlook, but still not completely. I still felt that I was missing something. I needed something bigger in my life. And then in Gallaudet, I was able to interact with other people who were deaf and hard of hearing. Everyone used sign language. I developed a social life. I became the president of the Graduate Student Association. And so I was involved in these different clubs. I hosted a number of different events. I had friends that I spent time with. And that was completely different from my experience in high school and at Miami University. It felt like a completely different life for me. And it was really a great couple years that I had at Gallaudet. But it was also sometimes the worst part of my life. The reason for that is that as a deaf person, I was surrounded by deaf people, so that was great. But many people also questioned me. They said, "You're not deaf. You don't seem like a deaf person." I remember some people telling me that I should get out because I wasn't deaf enough. And I didn't always understand those comments that I was getting from people. As a deaf person, and also as a Black person, those statements were, of course, often from a white person to me as a Black person, and they caused me to question myself. And so that was very difficult to balance, and that was a very strange time for me in some ways. So after my 2 years in the master's program, I graduated, and then I entered into the PhD program. And after I started in the PhD program, I started to reevaluate my choices again. I was getting free tuition, I was getting funding, I was pursuing my PhD, but I still didn't feel successful. I felt like I was failing in a lot of ways, and I felt like I was ready to leave. So around 2005, I entered a very dark period in my life, a very dark period, the darkest period of my life. It really, looking back on it, it was very difficult, and I felt like I had to leave. I could not continue with the PhD program. But at the same time, in a way, again, I was still motivated by wanting to prove to people that I could do it. As a Black deaf person, I could do it. So I met with the department chair, and what I wanted, really, what I narrowed it down to was that I wanted to experience other cultures. I wanted to experience something new. So I met with the department chair. I thought that I wanted to go to a different country, and I wanted their suggestion. And they told me that students who take a break typically don't come back. So that was eye-opening for me. And that made me wonder what I really wanted to do. There was another faculty Seal Lewis, who came up to me and offered some help. And that was one of the first really positive influences. They were one of my PhD advisors and also still a good friend and colleague of mine. And then another thing that helped me at that time was meeting Alicia Howard, now Alicia Allen. And previous to that, I had known Black deaf people, but I hadn't really connected with them. They hadn't really been in my group or in my cohort. But here with Alicia, we spent time together. We were at different years in college, but in 2006, we finally connected. We met each other, and we became friends very quickly. And that made a huge difference for me. We completely understood each other as Black deaf people, going through similar structures. We were going through similar obstacles, we were able to support each other. And we're still very good friends until now when we're both working at RIT still. So my PhD advisor helped me work out a Fulbright application, and I was accepted to go to Italy in 2008. So that was another big change for me. There were a lot of experiences that I gained there that really changed the way that I looked at life and also helped me get through my PhD program. Another big thing that helped me get through my PhD program was this, of course, the Black ASL Project. Dr. Seal Lucas there is sitting with the white hair, my PhD advisor, and the other members on the team of the Black ASL Project. We worked together for 5 years. We accomplished a lot, and it was hugely beneficial. We also published a book, this book, The Hidden Treasure of Black ASL. And from that, I learned a lot. I had many rich experiences, and this project also made a huge difference for me in my PhD education. Another important lesson learned from them was to give back to the community. We had collected all of this research on Black ASL, and we needed a way to give it back to the community. So we worked with the National Black Deaf Advocates Association. I went to their conferences several times and learned a lot from them. And I felt like I owed them that understanding of who they are, their rich narratives, their stories that they had shared with us. We wanted to reciprocate and give that back to them. So that was an important lesson learned from that project. So then I graduated with my PhD. It was not easy. I thought that a PhD was just like getting my education. I just needed to finish these things. And then I realized that there were also politics that I had to deal with. There was a lot of infighting on my PhD committee, on my dissertation committee. And it was very hard to navigate that. Honestly, I thought that I wouldn't be able to graduate because there was one person who made it very, very difficult for me to continue and to finish my dissertation. But again, I fought through it, I succeeded, and I graduated with my PhD.
So there are 14 Black deaf Americans with PhDs. I thought, wow, 14, but that's a very small number. That means it's so small that if you look at trends related to educational degrees, the last dot, the far right, the PhD level, Black hearing people has an estimate income, but Black deaf people do not. So I feel that we need more. We need more eyes on this. We need more studies on this. So I started working in 2010, University of North Carolina. At that time, well, I really learned a lot from my time there, and the community was great there. The faculty were wonderful. I really enjoyed the people there, but at the same time, it helped me figure out what I really wanted and didn't want. Previously, I had followed other people and kind of what they wanted for me in my life, but I needed to do what I needed and wanted for my research, for my career. So I looked for another job, applied, and was hired at RIT NTID. So I've been involved in a variety of things since my time here, teaching, research, traveling the world. You can see the Zoom shot here is the center on the NTID Research Center on Culture and Language. The director is Dr. Peter Hauser. It's been a great experience working with Dr. Hauser in the center and as well as RIT and NTID. And then remember how resistant I was for writing from 4th grade until now. I've had over 25 publications, and I've published with a variety of famous, well-known researchers also. So I became a writer, I guess. Now on to my research. I have a variety of projects, but one that, of course, is very close to my heart is my dissertation for my PhD because of the struggle it was to finish that. Again, I mentioned my experience at Gallaudet, being looked at or told that I wasn't deaf enough for whatever reason. I think maybe my 4th or 5th year after graduating, someone came up to me and I was signing, and this stranger said, "Oh, well, obviously you're deaf." And I'm like, "Well, why? Why do you think so?" And they said, "Because you just, crunched your nose up a little bit. You crinkled your nose." I'm like, "Wait, that?" So all this time, all I had to do was crinkle my nose a little bit and I would be deaf. I would be seen as deaf. Seriously? Is that all I had to do? So that made me think of how attitudes affect language and identities, and how identities and backgrounds can impact language and language perceptions from other people. So for my dissertation, I had 74 people. Not really sure how, but I had over a period of 3 years. I'm not sure exactly how I did it, but I did it. And they weren't really balanced groups. It was hard to get, white fluent signers who grew up signing, and then, these other groups. It was hard to get balanced, Black and white signers, and native and non-native, and split that up. But also, we wanted to get their perceptions. So we had videos, I think a total of 60 or 80 different videos, short videos that they would view, and they would say, rate it as ASL or not ASL. So the top is, yes, ASL, and the bottom would be no, not ASL. The grayish area, more gray, is not ASL, and the darker is ASL. Then as you go across, there's from strong ASL to non-ASL. So one example here of the video that we showed. Obviously, the black man signing, we would say that is ASL. And then the second video of the white woman signing, you would say that's maybe somewhat ASL. Some people said that that was, or some people were mixed, had mixed feelings, and maybe said that they had hearing parents. If she was deaf, she had hearing parents. Black deaf group that grew up native using ASL. It seems that if people can be well understood, that it seems that they are considered native ASL users. So it was interesting what we found from these subjects. Now, the evaluation of ASL. It's difficult to say a direct statement that something is ASL or isn't ASL, especially related to attitudes. So, oh, that signing is, you sign beautiful or you sign smoothly. Those are really like positive. Or the signer looks like a leader in the deaf community, or the signer seems to be a strong deaf person. You can see these right here. That it reflects the attitude of the person signing. For ASL, it seems that it was positive across the board. But then when it says the signer looks hearing, there was a strong disagreement on that one. Now, the comments about ASL, there were a variety of comments, clear, fluid, etc. You can see here on this chart, but then also there were comments about like, that was good English. Well, what does that mean? What does good English mean? For me, personally, analyzing this data, I was thinking about that statement and language. And from some of these comments, there seems to be a strong attitude about English versus ASL. And, you know, there was an attitude about if you use the initialized signs, that was less ASL. So there was a variety of factors that influenced whether people said something was ASL or was not ASL. Now then, the evaluation of signed English. There was a higher percentage of disagreement on the signed English and what was signed English or not. There were, you know, the signing is pure, or the signer looks like a leader in the deaf community. It seems like signer looks like a leader in the deaf community. Those numbers were swapped, and there was a higher disagreement on this one for the signed English. I thought these results were interesting. There was a comment like, oh, the signer looks educated and the signer looks smart. There was a higher percentage of agreement for the signed English portion, which I thought was really interesting. So you are looking at a person and the way they sign and judging their intelligence based on that. It seems that there are a variety of attitudes based on the way that someone might sign and the perception based on that. So I wanted to look into more of that. So then we developed an animation to where we could mask the identity of a person. So I could copy or replicate someone's signing style and features, but could change out their appearance, maybe a black man or a white woman or whatever we wanted them to look like. And then we could test participants and see if their responses changed based on the look of the avatar. So for example, you can see a signing here. So that was just one example. But again, I'm excited that we can do that now, more on that work because of the technology we have at RIT. But, you know, in looking back from when I was younger to now being faculty at RIT and NTID and thinking about what helped me continue through and not get off course. Some things that helped me continue: I'm curious, I'm resilient. You know, I have a sense of duty, I'm persistent, I advocate for myself. And again, I was talking about my brother, Greg, who graduated college and then went on to succeed in his career. As a Black deaf kid above me, you know, I realized that was possible. And then, of course, I do struggle with imposter syndrome. Most individuals have that. Me, particularly as a Black deaf man, growing up feeling insecure and unsure of who I was, then going through graduate school and getting my PhD and becoming faculty. Although I have been successful, this imposter syndrome feeling has only diminished in the last maybe 2 years. I still have it some, but it's diminished a little bit. And like I said previously, I almost quit 5 different times. And these are part of the reasons: the anxiety and depression, fatigue, maybe not having resources that I needed. Things that did help me were my community, my network. When I had a strong network, that helped a lot. And also understanding that frustrations that I face, a lot of the barriers are systemic barriers that other disabled people and people of color experience, and that I'm not the only one. I'm very aware of what I'm trying to navigate through, but I also know that I'm not the only one. But growing up, I think, helped me to become ready to face the world better as a Black deaf individual. I did have the resources to overcome institutional barriers, but not everyone does. And like I have mentioned, I could have gone off course. I could have quit, but I didn't. And fortunately, there are other deaf people, Black deaf people, who struggle with their identities and are trying to learn who they are. And, you know, we have to support each other. So thank you all so much.